Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the PREdiCCt IBD podcast. Today, we've got Lee and Lisa in conversation. So Lee Murphy runs the labs for the PREdiCCt study. So Lee's director of the Wellcome Trust Clinical Research Facility based on the Western General Hospital site in Edinburgh. And we've got Lisa Derr, who is the person that keeps PREdiCCt running and is really in charge of all operations. So without Lisa, nothing would be possible. And what they're going to talk about today is the samples from PREdiCCt, what happens to them, the processing, and all those aspects. So just before we get stuck in, again, just a quick flag for the study sponsors. That's Cure Crohn's and Colitis 3CS and the Chief Scientist Office and all the others who've made the study possible. So thanks to all you guys. So without further ado, Lee and Lisa, let's hear what you've got to have to say. Thanks.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for meeting with me today.
Hi, Lisa.
So I thought we could maybe just talk a little bit more about the PREdiCCt samples and if you have any top tips for the sites, what they should advise their patients to do and so on.
Yeah, sure. So I think the most important thing for the PREdiCCt study is making sure that you send in all the sample types. So there are 4 tubes in the pack, and it's really important that all 4 are filled in and sent in. Having said that, if you miss one out, please just do send in the ones that you have completed.
Grand. So the patient will take their pack home and they will fill the tubes. And then what happens?
Yeah, so I think when you take the pack home, just follow the instructions. The saliva is really easy. You just kind of, put your saliva into the tube. I find it easier if you think about salt and vinegar crisps. That gets my saliva going. But just think about some food that helps you produce the saliva. The really important things for the stool samples, or at least for the one in the buffer, the larger tube, is that you don't overfill it. You don't put too much in. The important thing for that sample is that there's a buffer in there, a liquid, and that we want all the stool to touch the liquid. So we just want a small pea-shaped size in that tube.
Okay, cool. And then the patient just puts them in the any post box, send them back to your lab.
Yeah, that's right. They just go in the normal post, and then they come to my lab in the morning, and then we take those samples and we book them into the system so that we know that we've received them. The saliva gets put into a normal fridge at 4 degrees just to keep it fresh. And then the stool samples we take and we put in a -80 freezer, a very low temperature freezer to keep that stable.
So how does that work? So you put the whole tube into a freezer?
Yeah, we just put the whole tube in the freezer until we're ready to start working with it. So that just keeps it nice and fresh.
Okay. And then when you're ready to start working with it, where does it go? Does it stay in your labs or does it send somewhere else for processing, or how does that part work?
Yeah, so all the processing happens in my lab in Edinburgh. So the saliva sample, we extract the DNA from the saliva. So within the saliva, there's cells from your mouth. So we break open those cells, we release the DNA, and then we're capturing that DNA. That's quite a quick process. It takes a few hours. And we're storing that DNA, and eventually we're going to send that down into Cambridge to the Sanger Centre, who are going to do the whole genome sequencing. So we know that inflammatory bowel disease, about 50% of the cause of inflammatory bowel disease is down to the genetics, and about 50% down to the environment. So when it goes out to Sanger, we do the whole genome sequencing. We can look at the genetics in much more detail, and we're looking for kind of novel variants which we think we can associate with the disease.
And when you're saying that you're looking at all the genetics, is there a likelihood of something being discovered that could have an impact for patients? And how would that work? Would they just come back to us and say that this participant, we found something, a genetic condition or something that could be treated? Or how does that work? Do you know?
It's all anonymized, and there's no genetic feedback as part of this study.
Okay. And then, so that was the saliva samples, and then the stool, is there a DNA extraction done on that as well?
Yeah, that's right. So for the stool samples, we're really interested to see what microbes are in there. So what kind of bacteria, fungus, virus are within that stool sample. So the most important thing is getting a stable sample into the lab, which is why it's in a buffer. We break open the cells, so we smash open the microbes to release the DNA, and then we extract that DNA, And then again, we're sequencing the DNA to identify what are those microbes.
Great. Is there anything else you think you should tell us about the sampling part?
Well, I could go on for hours about how exciting it is extracting DNA from stool samples, but that's probably enough for going on today.
Oh, thank you so much, Lee.